Hello everyone, I'm Rikta. Welcome back to Medicine Nursing. In today's sessions, we are going to talk about, as you can see here, that is regarding your menstrual cycles. What is this menstrual cycles? Why it happens? What is the science behind it? We will discuss in detail here. If you haven't watched our previous sessions, that is anatomy of female reproductive systems, which we already covered, then please go and check it out first because this will connect the dots more easily. Okay. Let's proceed this today's sessions. So what is this menstruations or menstrual cycles? So this menstruation is the cyclical bleeding. Okay, cyclical bleeding occurring in reproductive female. Reproductive female means from 15 to 49 years. Okay, at regular interval. And this is a physiological process. Any bleeding that is occurring in our body that must be having some physiology or some pathological source. But this menstrual cycle is a physiological process, and if this bleeding occurs, there is no pathology behind this. In every female, every reproductive female, they are undergoing these phases. Okay, this menstrual cycles on an average duration is 28 days, whole menstrual cycles. Okay, and this menstruations stays for 2 to 8 days, average we will say 4 to 6 days. Okay, and each month the female is through this female vagina approximately 50 to 80 ml blood lost through this vagina. Okay, so 35 ml on an average they are losing their blood through this vagina. And that's all about this menstrual cycle. Now we are continuously keep on saying this menstruation, but the fun fact is this menstrual cycle is not corresponds with only a single phase, that is menstrual phase, menstruation. Moreover, it has total 4 phases. Okay, so those 4 phases are: the first phase is your menstrual phase where bleeding is occur. The second phase is your follicular phase. We will explain it one by one. Okay, follicular phase. The third phase is your ovulation phase, and the fourth phase is your luteal phase. Okay, luteal phase or your secretory phase. Now we will skip this page. We will make point wise at the end of this today's sessions. First of all, we need to understand this whole from day 1 till day 28 what is happening through this menstrual cycle. As we say that this whole menstrual cycles we are dividing into 4 phases. So from day 1 till day 5 we are calling it as menstrual phase. Okay, menstrual phase. Again from day 1 till day 30 call it as second phase, and that is your follicular phase. Okay, now this day 14 is exclusively the third phase, that is your ovulation phase. Okay, this is the third phase, this is the first phase, this is the second phase, and the fourth phase starting from day 15 till the day 28, and that is called luteal phase or your secretory phase. Okay, we will explain it one by one. Now first let's skip this first part. We will explain this menstrual phase at later stage. Okay, one by one we will discuss. Okay? In the first phase, coming to the menstrual phase, the first phase is your menstrual phase. Menstrual phase. Okay, now before understanding this whole menstrual cycle, just remember this whole menstrual cycle stands on your FSH and LH hormone, estrogen and progesterone hormone, their positive and negative feedback. Okay, positive, negative feedback, this all will come one by one. Okay, this all are the main hormones that regulate your menstrual cycle. And if this is the uterus of female body, just remember in each month this is the endometrium lining, right? This is the endometrium lining of uterus, and in each month during this menstrual phases this endometrium layer is shedding off, and that is why through, because of this shedding of endometrium, bleeding is coming through this vagina to the outside. This is the menstrual phase. Now endometrium gets supports. This endometrium gets support by the help of estrogen and progesterone. This estrogen and progesterone both support your uterus. Okay, estrogen helps to proliferate the uterus. As a result, uterus lining gets thickened, and progesterone supports or making the lining of this uterus. And these two hormones help to support the uterus. It will support the uterus. That's why when it supports the uterus, there will be no menstruation. So imagine, if there is less estrogen, if there is less progesterone, then endometrium won't get any supports. Then there will be shredding of uterus. As a result, bleeding will come through this vagina, and at this time menstrual phase happen. So in easy way, I will say menstrual cycle occurs when there is less estrogen and less progesterone. Okay, menstrual phase is the bleeding phase. Okay, it stays from day 1 to day 5. Okay, the third thing you need to remember, if there is less estrogen and less progesterone, okay, then no endometrium gets supports, then only shedding of uterus happen, and then bleeding will come out, bleeding through vagina, and that is called menstrual phase. Understood? So in easy way, we will say estrogen and progesterone give supports to your uterus. If there is less amount of estrogen and progesterone, there will be no support in the uterus, and that is why shedding of uterus or endometrium occur. And if there is shedding, then there will be bleeding through the vagina. As a result, menstrual phase will occur, and it will stay from day 1 to day 5. That's all about your menstrual phase you need to remember. So we will enlisted here the first phase. Okay, the first phase is your menstrual phase. Menstrual phase, it stays for approximately D1 to D5. Understood? The key hormone, what you understand from the previous concept, that if estrogen less, progesterone less, progesterone amount is less, and that is why this menstrual phase occurs. So the key hormone is less amount of estrogen and less amount of progesterone. That's why this menstrual phase occurs. And the main event, what is the main event? Bleeding occurred due to shedding of endometrium or the inner lining of uterus. Okay, so that's all about your menstrual phase, the first phase of your menstrual cycles you need to remember. Now coming to the second step. What is the second step? That is your follicular phase. Okay, follicular phase. What you need to remember from this follicular phase? Now students, listen carefully. This menstrual cycle is very confusing topic, so I need to make it clear for you at this time. So your priority or your responsibility, your task is to make your notes in a clear and concise way, so that when next time we will come and revise this, you should not forget the old concept what I taught at this time. So listen carefully. This follicular phase, already menstrual phase you studied. Now coming to your follicular phase, the second phase. This follicular phase is regulated by HPO axis. Now you will say, ma'am, what is this HPO axis? HPO axis stands for your hypothalamic, pituitary, ovarian axis. Okay, so H for hypothalamic, P for pituitary, O for ovarian axis. What is this? So once the female attain puberty, HPO axis gets activated. Okay, so before that this HPO axis was in immature state. Once the female attained puberty, the HPO axis activated and your hypothalamus is the main source. Then through the message of hypothalamus, pituitary, anterior pituitary gets activated. Once the anterior pituitary gets activated, it sends message to ovary, and then ovary also gets activated and start its functions. Now how it do their action, we will come one by one. So once the female attain its puberty, HPO axis gets activated and then your hypothalamus becomes active. Okay, so first who gets activated? Your hypothalamus. Once this hypothalamus gets activated, it will release GnRH, release from hypothalamus. So what is this GnRH stands for? GnRH stands for gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, now once this gonadotropin releasing hormone release, it sends message to anterior pituitary. Send message to anterior pituitary. Once this anterior pituitary gets its message, anterior pituitary gets activated. Okay, once it gets message from this GnRH, anterior pituitary gets activated. Once this anterior pituitary gets activated, it releases two hormones. Okay, one is FSH, that stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and another one is your LH, that is luteinizing hormone. Now you don't remember this luteinizing hormone as per now, because you are understanding the second phase, that is your follicular phase. So in this follicular phase, your FSH acts as a crucial role. So you have to think about this FSH only. So here you don't need to think about this LH now. We will discuss about how this FSH is acting. Okay, so once the GnRH release and it sends message to anterior pituitary, your anterior pituitary gets activated and it releases the FSH hormone. So FSH, in that name itself, it is indicating that follicle stimulating hormone. So it is such kind of hormone which stimulates the follicle. Now you will ask me, ma'am, where is this follicle present? So follicle presence inside your ovary. Okay, here is your follicle presence. See, you can see here, this is primordial follicle. These all are primordial follicle. Then here is your primary follicle. Here is your secondary follicle. Here is your graphium follicle. So what this FSH will do? FSH will come and act on those follicle. Okay. So what happened? Due to the influence of this FSH hormone, this FSH will stimulate the primordial follicle. Okay. Primordial follicle. Then primordial follicle turns into primary follicle. Primary follicle turns into secondary follicle. Secondary follicle turns into graphium follicle or mature follicle. Okay, so due to the influence of this primordial follicle, influence of this FSH, primordial follicle turns into primary follicle. Due to the influence of this FSH hormone, primary follicle turns into secondary follicle. Due to the influence of this FSH hormone, secondary follicle turns into graphium follicle or mature follicle. What will happen if they turns one by one from primary, secondary, tertiary? It all will release estrogen hormone. Okay, I told you earlier, this whole menstruational concept is stand on estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, LH hormone. Now this FSH acts on follicles. They all follicle release this estrogen hormone. Okay, so from where this estrogen came? Follicles release estrogen hormone. Okay, estrogen hormone. Now what will happen? What this estrogen will do? This estrogen also having different action or functions in the menstrual phase, particularly in the follicular phase of menstrual cycles. What are the functions of this estrogen hormone? This estrogen will send negative feedback on FSH. At where? At anterior pituitary. Okay? What I will explain it later. Other function is send positive feedback on LH at where? At anterior pituitary. So I told you earlier, this whole menstrual cycle is stand on positive feedback, negative feedback, FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone. Now this progesterone I didn't mention for a single time because its function didn't came yet. Now estrogen is, this is your hypothalamus, right? Hypothalamus. This hypothalamus secretes GnRH, as I told earlier. It acts on your anterior pituitary. Okay, this anterior pituitary release two hormone, that is FSH and LH, and I told you that as we are studying follicular phase, so we will think about this FSH. Its function will come at later stage, so we didn't mention at that time. Now its functions will come. Now FSH acts on ovary. Ovary is having follicles, and those follicles release your estrogen. Now I told you this estrogen is having three functions here, sending the negative feedback on FSH. So this estrogen is sending the negative feedback on anterior pituitary. As a result, what will happen? This anterior pituitary sends signal to FSH. If there is negative feedback, means there is less amount of FSH. Okay. Again, this estrogen is sending the positive feedback on LH at anterior pituitary. If estrogen is sending positive feedback, means more amount of LH will release. Can you imagine how interesting concept is this? Now see, all follicles releases estrogen. Estrogen is having, I told you, mainly two functions, that is send negative feedback on FSH at anterior pituitary. That's why estrogen is sending negative feedback on anterior pituitary. Because of that only FSH is decreasing. Again, estrogen is sending positive feedback on LH at anterior pituitary. Here is your estrogen sending positive feedback at anterior pituitary on LH. As because it is positive feedback, that's why more amount of LH will release. Okay. Now, if there is less LH, means FSH is decreasing. FSH is decreasing. What will happen? If there is less amount of FSH, then less stimulus on follicles. Okay, less stimulus on follicles, because follicles gets activated by the help of FSH, right? Here is your FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. It's sending message to the primordial follicle. Primordial turns into primary. From primary it is secondary. From secondary it is Graafian follicle, because FSH was at high level at this time. But if there is less FSH, what will happen? If there is less FSH, then less signals will go to the primordial follicle. Less signal go from primordial to primary. Like this, less stimulus on the follicles. As a result, all follicles will die. Follicles will die. If follicles will die, what will happen? There will be no estrogen. Understood? All follicles will die except Graafian follicle. Why I am saying only one follicle will remain alive, remaining will die? Because this Graafian follicle will play a crucial role in the later stage of your menstrual cycle. That is why all follicles will die except Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle will alive, all will get die. Why all are getting dies? Because of there is less amount of FSH. Why there is less amount of FSH? Because this estrogen is sending negative feedback to anterior pituitary and telling, this estrogen is telling to anterior pituitary that decrease the FSH level, decrease the FSH level. Why you need to decrease the FSH level? Because there is more amount of FSH is there. All follicles gets activated. Now I am secreting in more amount. I am means estrogen. Estrogen is secreting in more amount. If there is more amount of estrogen, then there will be endometrial thickens will be more. If there is more amount of endometrial thickens, then that will lead to endometrial cancer and other concept also there. So estrogen will send the negative feedback to FSH. All follicles will get die except the Graafian follicle will still alive. So that is one function of estrogen. Now the second function is send the positive feedback on LH at anterior pituitary. That is why estrogen is sending positive feedback on LH at anterior pituitary. As a result, LH is getting increases. If there is more amount of LH, LH will reach to its peak level. As a result, what will happen? LH surge will be there. What is LH surge? LH surge means LH will reach to its peak level, and that is called LH surge. Why this LH surge is important? This LH surge is important at your third stage. What is your third stage? Third stage of menstrual cycle is your ovulation phase. Here this LH concept will come. I will tell you when and why this LH concept will come. So the estrogens, another function, sends the positive feedback on LH at anterior pituitary. As a result, LH getting increases. As LH is getting increases, it will lead to LH surge. So that is the second functions of your estrogen. What is the third functions of estrogen? I told you earlier that the third functions of estrogen is here. Where? Here. This estrogen is proliferate the uterus, for supporting the uterus, because at menstrual phase this uterus is shredding off, right? This shredding off, this one shredding off. As a result, it's become thinned. Okay, so it needs supports. This uterus needs supports. That's why what will do, this after menstrual phase, this endometrium gets thinned. Okay, that is why estrogen proliferate the uterus lining. As a result, uterus gets thickened. Okay, again, at first stage of menstrual cycle, that is in menstrual phase, this is your uterus. Okay, this uterus shedding off, right? Bleeding was there. So now menstrual phase over. Now second stage came. Second stage means follicular phase. At this follicular phase, estrogen release. This estrogen will support this shredding uterus. It will support the uterus by proliferate it like this, so that it will again gets healed. Okay, as it was shredding off, there was bleeding. That's why now estrogen is acting on uterus and it proliferate the uterus and it's now healed. Okay, so that is the functions of the third functions of your estrogen. I think it's clear. That's all about your follicular phase. Again, I will revise. So in first phase of your menstrual cycle, so what happened? It is the bleeding phase. Why it stays for D1 to D5? It is due to the less amount of estrogen and progesterone. As less amount of estrogen and progesterone was there, no supports was getting from this estrogen and progesterone. That's why shedding of uterus occurred. If there is shedding of uterus, there will be bleeding through vagina, and that is called your menstrual phase. So your menstrual phase already over. Coming to the second phase, that is follicular phase. Follicular phase, I told you, regulated by your HPO axis, that is hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. This HPO axis gets activated at puberty stage. Once the female attains puberty, hypothalamus becomes active. Then it releases the GnRH hormone. GnRH means gonadotropin releasing hormone. This gonadotropin releasing hormone sends message to anterior pituitary. As a result, anterior pituitary will release follicle stimulating hormone. In that name itself, it is mentioned that follicle stimulating hormone means the hormone which stimulates the follicle. Where is your follicle present? Follicle present at cortex region of ovary. Okay, now due to the influence of this FSH hormone, primordial follicle turns into primary follicle turns into secondary follicle turns into Graafian follicle or mature follicle. All these follicles now release estrogen, the main hormone at follicular phase. So this estrogen will release, and it is having total 3 functions. One function is that it supports the shredded uterus, because at menstrual phase the uterus shed off and it became thin layer. So now estrogen will come and proliferate the uterus so that uterus gets thickened. This is the function. Another function is estrogen sends negative feedback on FSH. Estrogen sends positive feedback on LH. If there is negative feedback on FSH, means there will be less FSH. If there is positive feedback on LH, there will be more amount of LH. If there is more amount of LH, that will lead to LH surge. Now, if this is LH surge, what this LH surge will do? Now coming to your third stage. Already follicular stage over. So we will enlist it again here. The second stage, that is the follicular stage. What we learned in follicular phase, this is the second stage, right? The follicular stage. So it stayed for what we learned from day 1 to day 13 till here. This follicular stage stays for day 1 to day 13. What is the main hormone we studied here? FSH, okay, because follicle stimulating hormone. At this stage, follicular stimulating hormone will be in peak level. As a result, estrogen will be also in peak level, okay. At the end, estrogen will send negative feedback to FSH and FSH will get decreased. But at the beginning of this phase, FSH was in high amount. As a result, estrogen also high amount. Why? Because estrogen is in high amount? Because FSH acts on follicles release estrogen. That's why both were in high amount. Then at the end of follicle phase, both will be decreased. That we will come in later stage. The major event at this follicular phase was follicles grows. Why follicle grows? Due to the influence of your FSH hormone. This follicle release estrogen. So estrogen builds the endometrium. Okay, endometrium. Builds endometrium means proliferate the endometrium. Proliferate the endometrium. As a result, endometrium gets thickened. Okay, thickened. This is the whole concept of your follicular phase. We will come the ovulation phase. Okay, so ovulation phase, this is the third phase. That is your ovulation phase. We will learn what will happen this ovulation phase. So here is your ovulation phase. Ovulation phase. Okay, now again here is your LH surge, right? We learned earlier. Now this LH surge will act a crucial role in this ovulation phase. Now what is this ovulation phase? Again we will paste up this picture here. Okay, see, here is your mature follicle, right? It is your mature follicle. Inside this mature follicle, what is present? If let's think this is the mature follicle, okay? This is your mature follicle. Inside this mature follicle, primary oocyte present. This is the primary oocyte. Okay, this primary oocyte undergone meiosis 1. Primary oocyte. This primary oocyte complete its meiosis 1. Complete its meiosis 1 at the time of ovulation. Okay, and it will become secondary oocyte. So inside this mature follicle, this primary oocyte turns into secondary oocyte and it completes its meiosis 1, and this mature follicle now gets ruptured. Why it is getting ruptured? Because of the influence of your LH surge. Secondary oocyte comes out along with the secondary oocyte comes out along with one polar body. This is the first polar body. There will be first polar body, second polar body. As per now, the secondary oocyte along with first polar body will come. Why it is coming? Because here this is the concept. This LH surge, due to the influence of this LH surge, okay, here this LH surge will act here at the third stage. In this third stage, LH, due to the influence of LH surge, graphium follicle gets ruptured and secondary oocyte. This secondary oocyte's another name is ovum. This ovum gets released with first polar body, and that is the concept of ovulation. So what is the meaning of ovulation? Due to influence of LH surge, where this LH surge concept came from your follicular phase. Because of this, estrogen sends positive feedback to anterior pituitary to release more amount of LH. Now you understand where this LH act. This LH act in third stage, that is your ovulatory phase, ovulation phase. Okay, now due to the influence of this LH surge, secondary oocyte from graphium follicle release, follicles release along with first polar body. So the simple concept is primary oocyte turns into secondary oocyte, and that is called your ovulation. And how it's happened? Due to the influence of your LH surge. So ovulation, the main concept is ovulation occurs only because of this LH surge. Okay, so ovulation occur because of LH surge, and that is very, very important. Sometimes questions came directly, ovulation occurs due to the influence of LH, FSH, estrogen, progesterone. So you will blindly answer it as LH. Okay, so ovulation occurs due to the influence of LH, and that's all about your third phase, that is your ovulation phase. So we completed the ovulation phase here, and we will enlisted what we learned in ovulation phase. So ovulation phase is the third phase, and the days is at day 14. Only for one day it stays, this ovulation stage stays for one single day, that is day 14. And the main or key hormone, what is the key hormone here? LH surge. Okay, you need to remember this LH surge. What is the main major event occur here? Ovum, that is secondary oocyte. Okay, secondary oocyte released from where? Released from dominant or your graphium follicle. Okay, this is the major event occur in this stage. Now we will jump into our fourth stage, that is your luteal stage or secretory stage. Okay, so one by one we will come. This is your fourth stage, that is your luteal stage or secretory stage. Now we will study about what will happen in this luteal phase. So this is very clear that in first stage what happened, in second stage what happened, in third stage what happened. Now in fourth stage, that is your luteal phase or your secretory phase. Now in this phase what happens? See, I told you earlier, here in this graphium follicles gets ruptured. Okay, this is the graphium follicle. Inside this graphium follicle, primary oocyte convert into secondary oocyte, and it gets ruptured due to the influence of LH surge. It's get ruptured. As a result, what will happen? Secondary oocyte release along with your first polar body. Okay, this first secondary oocyte also we call it ovum. Now can you ever think about what will happen with the leftover portion, this one, the leftover things of this graphium follicle? What we will call it? We will call it as corpus luteum. This is the major leftover things which will act as a main role in this luteal phase. Now the leftover things, so what we will call the corpus luteum? Corpus luteum is the leftover portion of dominant or graphium follicle after releasing secondary oocyte, that is ovum, along with first polar body. Okay, so this leftover portion is called corpus luteum. Now what this corpus luteum will do? Corpus luteum will secretes the main hormone, that is your progesterone. So in your follicular phase, that is in your second phase, here is your follicular phase, right? Follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. This is the follicular phase. In this follicular phase, the main hormone was your estrogen. This is your estrogen. So in the secretory phase or luteal phase, the main hormone will be your progesterone. Okay, so remember, in follicular phase the main hormone estrogen. In the luteal phase, that is the last phase of menstrual cycle, the main hormone is your progesterone. Although this corpus luteum secretes less amount of estrogen also, but the main hormone it releases is progesterone along with estrogen, and also it's release few amount of inhibin hormone also. Now what this estrogen will do, as I already told you, this estrogen will, wait, I'll come one by one. this estrogen is also having two functions here. One, this estrogen will, this estrogen function is to what? Proliferate the uterus. Proliferate the uterus. That you already learned. What is this functions of progesterone? This progesterone is having two functions. Once I already told you earlier, it will also supports the uterus. Okay, it will support the uterus. Estrogen proliferate the uterus. Progesterone will support this uterus also. So support the uterus. Okay, uterus through its secretory action. So this is the functions of progesterone, one function. Now second function is this progesterone sends negative feedback. Where? Negative feedback to anterior pituitary for LH. So this is your hypothalamus. It's release GnRH. GnRH act on anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary release two hormones, that is your FSH and LH. FSH acts as major hormone at your follicular phase. LH acts as a major hormone at your ovulation phase. Along with your, due to the influence of this LH surge only, it also acts on your secretory or luteal phase. Okay, luteal phase. Now this progesterone will sense the negative feedback. This progesterone will send the negative feedback on your anterior pituitary for LH. As a result, what will happen? This LH will get decreased. Okay, see how beautiful concept. Because of this LH surge only, graphium follicle gets ruptured. Ruptured. Okay, when the LH surge, because due to the more amount of LH hormone, graphium follicle ruptured and it became corpus luteum, right? Corpus luteum and secondary oocyte formed. Now if there is less amount of LH surge, then there will be less amount of corpus luteum. Means it's not less amount of corpus luteum, corpus luteum will get dies. Okay, corpus luteum get dies. It's very easy. Okay, you don't need to be confused. Due to LH surge, graphium follicle gets ruptured and it make corpus luteum along with the secondary oocyte due to the influence of LH surge. Now progesterone, what it is doing, progesterone sending the negative feedback on LH, anterior pituitary. That's why LH will get decreased. If LH will get decreased, then corpus luteum will dies. Because of corpus luteum, it's formed because of the influence of LH surge only now. So if there is less amount of LH, then corpus luteum will dies. If corpus luteum will dies, then progesterone will be secrete in less amount, estrogen will secrete in less amount, inhibin will secrete in less amount, because corpus luteum only releases those hormones, right? This hormone here, this hormone. Now if corpus luteum is releasing in less amount, there will be less progesterone, there will be less estrogen, there will be less inhibin. So you know this estrogen and progesterone giving support to uterus, right? Here they are supporting the uterus. Now if there is less amount of estrogen, progesterone, there will be no support to uterus, due to less estrogen plus progesterone. As a result, what will happen? Then again there will be shedding of uterus. If there is shedding of uterus, then new cycle will begin. So can you imagine? The last step is your luteal phase. Okay, once the luteal phase over, that means D28 already reached, then again new cycle should be initiated, right? So how this new cycle is initiated? Because this luteal phase, due to this LH surge, graphium follicle gets ruptured and it releases secondary oocyte and first polar body, and the leftover portion we were calling it as corpus luteum. This corpus luteum releasing the main hormone progesterone, few amount of estrogen and few amount of inhibin. Estrogen functions you already know, proliferate the uterus. Progesterone functions you already know, support the uterus. Okay, progesterone also sending the negative feedback to LH on anterior pituitary. As a result, LH will get decreased. If there is LH get decreased, then corpus luteum gets dies, because corpus luteum is formed due to the influence of LH surge only. Now if corpus luteum get dies, progesterone will be less, estrogen will be less, inhibin will be less. If less progesterone, if less estrogen, then there will be no support to uterus. If there is no support to uterus, there will be shedding of uterus. If there is shedding of uterus, then there will be new cycle begins from day 1. Again this menstrual phase will occur, again this follicular phase will occur, again this ovulation occur, again this luteal phase occur, again the new cycle start from D1. It will stay for D28 with those 4 cycles one by one, like this whole menstrual phase is occurring. So again we will enlisted what will happen in the luteal phase as we have discussed here. So luteal phase stayed for day 15 to day 28 here, from D15 to D28. Okay, so the major hormone is your progesterone. Okay, here. So where the major hormone was estrogen, here in the follicular phase. In luteal phase, progesterone is the main hormone. What is the major event occurring in this events? Actually, initially this progesterone was supporting the uterus. Okay, supporting the uterus. Now let's think, ovulation occur. Here ovulation, at ovulation phase, secondary oocyte form, from primary oocyte. Okay, primary oocyte. Now let's think, secondary oocyte means ovum, right? Now let's think this female undergone copulation, means intercourse. She has done sex with her partner. Let's think this can be 2 situations happen in female body. If she has done intercourse after this ovulation, then this ovum will fertilized with sperm and then female will get pregnant. And if there will be no fertilization, then corpus luteum will sheds off, corpus luteum dies. But if fertilization occur, then female will get pregnant and this corpus luteum will secrete progesterone, and this progesterone will act as a main hormone in pregnancy. Okay, main hormone in pregnancy. It will continuously, this progesterone remain in the body. This progesterone remain throughout pregnancy. Okay, pregnancy, what it will do, it will support uterus for implantation. It will make a good environment for implantation. Fetus will grow at good environment. So this progesterone will support the uterus throughout the pregnancy, and it will make a favorable environment for implantation if there is fertilization occur. Now if there is no fertilization, corpus luteum will remain for few days. It will supports the progesterone, it will support the uterus by secreting the progesterone, and then when it will send the negative feedback on LH will get decreases, negative feedback, and then corpus luteum will dies. Then there will be no support to uterus, and then new cycle will begin. See, that is totally 2 different concepts. Okay, ovum release at D14, then D15 to D28 luteal phase stays. So this luteal phase will be going to in 2 different ways. If fertilization occur, this corpus luteum continuously secrete progesterone. This progesterone will remain throughout the pregnancy. It supports the uterus throughout the pregnancy for implantation purpose. If fertilizations won't occur, then corpus luteum will dies due to the less amount of LH hormone because of its own negative feedback to anterior pituitary, and then no support to uterus, the new cycle will begin. But here there will be no new cycle. During pregnancy there will be no menstruation throughout this pregnancy, as because continuous progesterone level will be high, and that is why, as because continuous progesterone level high, so no new cycle throughout pregnancy. Okay, and as because here is corpus luteum dies, so corpus luteum release progesterone, right? So there will be less progesterone, and as because there is less progesterone, no support to uterus, new cycle begins. Can you imagine what is the concept behind new cycle begins and new cycle cease? So this progesterone is supporting the uterus. If there is less progesterone, then only new cycle will begin. If there is continued progesterone will be high, then there will be no cycle. And that is why you heard, if the female will be having any events in family, okay, events in family or in relatives family, and let's think the female will be having a due date on August 5, she is having her period date, and today is July 30. So what that female will do, that female will tries not to get her period. So what she will do, she will due date, she will take, you heard about norepinephrine, okay, norepinephrine 5 mg. Exclusively we will call it as Primolute 5, Primolute N 5 mg. We are taking it 3 times TDS. So it gives synthetic progesterone. Female will take those pill and this progesterone level will be high. It will support the uterus. So there will be no cycle. She won't get her menstruation. She won't get period on her due date. So can you imagine how this progesterone is helping for getting this period, and how without the absence with the absence of progesterone, how females are getting pregnancy. So this is the concept of your, not pregnancy, period. So this is all about the concept of your this menstrual cycle. So the major events at the luteal phase is that with the presence of progesterone, support uterus for implantation as fertilizations occur, right? But with the absence of progesterone, as because this corpus luteum dies, then no support to uterus, then next cycle begins, means menstrual bleeding phase will occur. So that's all about your menstrual cycles, menstrual phases, the major events, the crucial hormone, how they are acting. So in the part 2 again I will include few important topics regarding your menstrual cycle, and that is, without those concepts you won't understand the whole concept of this menstrual cycle. So prepare your notes properly. Again we will come with the part 2 of menstrual cycle. So thank you so much students.